Hello everyone and welcome to the Fiction Foundry podcast. This is episode 19. I'm Phil.
And I'm Ben.
And a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Ben, we've not done a podcast for a little while.
It's been ages actually.
Yeah. We have actually recorded another podcast which we'll be uploading first. What's that about?
So, basically, just to try and explain, this is going to be out of sequence slightly now. So, we've already recorded the podcast that you've already heard.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Because we're going to put that one up first, and then we're going to just leave it a couple of weeks, so that you don't get too bored of us too quickly, and then put this one up.
Yeah, we think that's the two weeks.
So really, by the time this one goes out, they'll know all about the other one.
Okay, so I'll just shut up then.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Have you got any other housekeeping for us?
Don't think so.
Should we just...
Although I can tell you again, because we talk about Cloud 12 a lot on this show. But I think it's important for us to just pass on the fact that one of our videos has recently won the UK Music Video Awards.
God, I thought you were going to say somebody had died. I went into this. What's happened?
Well, they might die next year if we don't win it again.
Oh, wow. Well done. Congratulations.
Thanks, Phil.
That
means a lot coming from you.
Anyway, let's move on. No, the video was which one?
It was Not Giving In by Rudimental,
mm-hmm.
the one that we went to Manila and filmed.
Mm-hmm.
Really ball ache of a film to shoot. It's one of those things that as you're doing it, you think, oh, I just want to go home. But once it's done, you kind of realise that actually it was worth every second of sweat that you poured out on it. And luckily it was picked up by the UK Music Video Awards and won Best Dance Music Video.
And of course, you weren't just shooting that; you were also
associate producer on that one
yeah.
as well.
So you got some of your fingerprints on that award.
Yes,
right?
yeah. No, I haven't seen it.
Was Josh very gushing in his thanks to you?
I'm sure he was. I wasn't actually at the award ceremony, so no.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't go in for all of that kind of stuff. I'm very humble about this kind of stuff. But I'm more than happy to win any award. I just
might not turn up.
Might not turn up to get it. Yeah.
Why? Because you're at home watching 24.
How did you know?
Because I can see on your Facebook feed.
My Netflix feed. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, okay then. Great.
Yeah.
What
about yourself?
What
awards have you won recently, Phil?
Moving on. How long can I sit in my ass in the chair for a award? Which is actually, what I've been up to is just because obviously we're trying to move on to the feature project now. Although we are still developing these short projects, it's all about features now, really, for us, isn't it? And so I've been in research / screenwriting mode. I'm in the middle of writing one project and researching a second. And so I thought we'd just, again, going back to the remit of this podcast is, what are we kind of doing to try and get that door open into the feature world? And so I thought I would talk about research, and I thought you would talk about working on these kind of high-end promos that you seem to have a glut of recently. So who wants to go first? Do you want
I think you should go first.
Yes? Yeah? Okay, why? Because I always make you go first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm interested to know what the difference is between writing and researching and just, sat on Facebook.
Researching is you go on Facebook and Twitter and you look at funny videos on YouTube.
Absolutely.
The difference between research and actually screenwriting is when you're screenwriting, you look at funny cat videos on YouTube.
Yes, so they always help. I should point out for those of you who are very eagle-eared, the noise that you can hear in the background, we're still living on a bit of a building site here, so it's just...
Yeah, but Ben's having a new wing built on the ranch.
I wish that was true.
So, it's the east wing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, you've already got the west wing.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so... actually, research is... I've talked about screenwriting before, and I'm in the middle of writing something right now, but if we go to the actual research phase, which is one I've been doing a lot of recently and wanted to talk about, obviously there are two main parts. One is the primary research, where you're going out and speaking to people, you're getting everything firsthand, and the second part is the secondary research. Now, the primary research for me is always the best, because I think and I learned this when I spoke to Stephen Knight as well. He kind of reiterated to me that when you're researching, don't get too hung up on the details. It's very easy to get hung up on the details, and but at the same time, what you really want is the story and the characters and the emotion. And you get that really from the primary research, and then later on, as you're writing the script, hopefully if you've got a good relationship with these people, you can dot the I's and cross the T's by just calling them up and finding out what's that form, or what's the process, what's the protocol for this action, whatever that particular detail is. And then what I like to do is keep those people, those primary contacts, in the loop, so that I can send them a draft of the script, and then they can point out my ridiculous, silly errors. So for the script I'm writing now, obviously it's set on a farm, so I've had to research farm, and I've been out to a farm many times, and had to research all sorts, learn everything that I could about farming. But there are lots of other projects, and for me, research is everything. Research will lead to a great script. There are one or two screenwriters who you listen to who do say that you can skip research. For me, you can't. I mean, the script is so much richer just having, just speaking to people. That's where you get those great scenes from. That's where you get that reality from. And when I write a script, I want those characters to be as real and identifiable as possible. And you hopefully you meet those people when you're doing that research. So
sorry to interrupt, but it's about selling the characters to the audience.
It is,
and making them credible.
And the job that they do.
Yeah. I mean, even if they're sort of, you've done a bit of research on, I don't know, X, Y, and Z that's to do on a farm that not many people would actually know about. But if your characters are sort of having a conversation about that, even if the audience don't really know what it is, kind of sells it.
Feels real. It feels lived in.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can fudge all that if you want, because, for example, if I'm writing a movie about farming, it's going to be a blockbuster, ladies and gentlemen. If I'm not writing it for farmers. So I don't think they're going to care if I get some of the procedures wrong.
Yeah.
But I think people can tell when you're BSing, and I think that the more it feels lived in. And also, what's lovely is I love to have dialogue and things peppered with language. For example, the short that I just wrote that you recently read, which is leading to a feature. There are sort of journalistic terms and things in there which I'm not pandering to the audience. I'm going to make those feel lived in. People will get it from the way things are implied, particularly through performance. But even on the page as well, I think people will get the intonation and get the intent of a line, even if they don't necessarily know the specific key term to do with journalism. But it's going to make it feel lived in. It's going to make it feel like these characters are real and are richer. Whereas if the dialogue is just functional, you kind of end up with this. Sometimes a utilitarian script that's just purely about function, and less about emotion and character and a world. And for me, a great script is about entering a world that you didn't know. Particularly in those first sort of 15-20 pages, you've got a character who's entering a world, and you're taking the audience into a world that you completely don't know whether that world is journalism or whether that world is farming, for example. But getting the right contacts and approaching people in the right way is the most important thing about your research. So what I've found is, what I've learned over the years with this is, you always have to, in your network of friends and family, you always think, how am I going to find someone who works in this field? In your network of friends and family, you are going to know someone who knows someone who knows someone who can put you in touch with the right person. I mean, I went to a couple of different farms before I found the right type of farm and the right person to help me with the script. And you're always going to find someone who can put you in touch with someone else. For example, there's and sometimes it's about, you get more than you bargained for. You'll meet someone to try and get one or two pieces of information, and you'll find a whole wealth of information that could be worthwhile, not just for this project but other projects. And it's about just keeping those contacts warm until they come in the right project. For example, I've done a lot of primary meetings recently, and one of them was through someone I was working with something else on. I got to an introduction to the head of the major crimes unit,
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's
that's quite an interesting.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of projects that I've got that are loosely based on the police or have the police, and of course I don't know police procedure any more than I used to watch The Bill.
Yeah.
So meeting him was a revelation. I mean, we just so far all we've done is met 2 hours coffee, but even from that, the wealth of stuff that is real. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell some of it, but I actually can't. But
you can't because it's part of an ongoing project that you're writing, or you can't because
the other
they swore you to secrecy.
They swore me to secrecy.
Right, that's interesting. I really want to know even more now.
Some of it's still ongoing, so unfortunately I can't talk about it. But it's stuff that you wouldn't believe. You'd think was in a film because it's so unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were talking about all sorts of because he's obviously been in charge of all the major incidents, terrorist incidents, mid-air collisions.
Really?
Yeah, and so we were talking about, well, if there's a mid-air collision, how you've got a detective. He doesn't know anything about aviation, they have to just be a sponge then and learn everything they can about procedure and things you already know about. But and so then it was like we were having conversations about, obviously he's done lots of murder cases, so it was what's it like looking into the eyes of a psychopath, and that's where not only do you get the procedure of right, okay, at what point can you charge someone, how does the actual process of going to a judge to get a court order so that you can keep someone in custody for longer than 36 hours. What's the actual physical process? And it's much more involved than I thought.
I guess that's, because we all kind of know what the broad theme of these things are, you know. I mean, I know that if you want to hold somebody for more than 36 hours, you're going to get a judge to say yes or no. But how you actually do that, I wouldn't have a clue.
Well, yeah, and this was the process that I didn't know. I was like, what is this?
Who do you ring?
Exactly. And the physical process is actually much more involved. There's a whole court procedure built around it. And so I was able to, you're able to get these kind of information. And if you look at a TV show like Silk, which is, it's a courtroom drama, they will hire writers who might not know anything about courtroom dramas, but I think those writers would find it extremely difficult to write that show without doing the research or without having the research people on set to help them, and that's where people like him come in. So he can also obviously put people who will be directly, when I've got the project, who will be directly able to talk about that. But obviously one of the things I'm doing is about journalism, and so he is able to tell me about, well, these over the last 20 years, these are my dealings with the press, and this is how the quid pro quo thing works of, if you give me some information, I'll give you some information. And I'm like, well, how does that physically happen? Is it over the phone? Is it, and how did you first get approached? And you talked about all those, little things. And then suddenly, when you hear these stories, all the scenes and possibilities start to pop into your head. But it's not just those procedures of how actually things happen. It's also the emotion, when we're talking about, he's looking in the eyes of someone he knows is a serial killer as he's interviewing them, what's going through his mind at the time, and what's this person saying, and what's happening in the room, and then those kind of things that you get from people are priceless. I mean, one of the other meetings I've been having recently is because one character is a former drug addict in one of the scripts I'm writing, so I've been going to these drugs meetings, not obviously for my own problem as well, but no, it's and I've been meeting some people who are really fleshing out the backgrounds to these characters, and again they can tell me stories that I wouldn't be able to make up. If I just came up with them, they'd just be generic and cliche, but they'll be real. Obviously you change things so that it's not, you're not identifying people or whatever, but you're allowed to put in real things. And sometimes you may go meet someone for 2 hours and you may only come out with one thing they said, but that one thing that they said will,
change everything.
Yeah, it could be the seed for an entire scene or an entire plot or an entire, or it just could be that one line that is, really rings home with people. The dangerous side of that, of course, is that screenwriters often become obsessed. And when
do you end the research?
Exactly, and there's this one anecdote, I think it was, I can't remember if it was William Goldman or someone said, where the screenwriter's son had died, and he calls another screenwriter, and he's crying down the phone to his the screenwriter about this tragedy, and there's a delayed response on the other end of the phone, and he's like,
dear.
"Are you writing this down?"
Oh, really?
Yeah, the other screenwriter on the other end of the phone is writing down what his friend is saying. Because he's trying to capture that raw emotion, and because you might be able to use it. So you do kind of become these kind of social vampires in a way.
Yeah.
Which is so you got to know when to stop.
I was going to say, I mean, otherwise you're just observing life.
Yeah. Exactly.
Rather than just being part of it sometimes, I suppose. So
do
you find that the research that you do, 90% of it is done prior to even starting a script, or do you find that...
about 90% I'd say, and the one I've been researching for a couple of years, the other one I've been sort of idly researching for maybe a year, and now I'm only starting to get down to proper primary research. I've just done a bit of secondary research, but don't underestimate secondary research as well. Read as many books as you can on the subject. Books are great. You'll find out so much stuff that you didn't even think was relevant. And also, secondary research on Google or whatever can be frustrating because you just want an answer to a specific question. But, don't underestimate that as well. There's a wealth of stuff online. So primary is really important. That's where you get those wonderful little details and those wonderful stories, and you really get the emotion. But sometimes just practically, just read books, and don't underestimate secondary research. Read the books, and it's hard to know when to start a project sometimes.
Yeah.
You
almost. I mean, it's almost like you say. When do you stop actually researching and just get on with telling the story? Because sooner or later, if you're doing a story about brain surgery.
Exactly.
Do you stop researching once you've got a degree in it? Do you know what I mean?
And this is something that I've always struggled with, and sometimes I go too far, and sometimes I don't go enough. I think I just start because I'm eager to just get writing, but then you'll end up getting stuck around page 20 because you realise what you're writing doesn't feel lived in enough, and you haven't done that proper research, and you don't have that language, and I find it's much harder to go back in a second draft and add all that. It's much better to get all that out of the way. I mean, the way I write is I write a very detailed treatment first, so I know every beat of the story. I will go off that. I'll allow myself to go off.
Do you write
piece.
the treatment before you do your research? Do you develop a story before you?
No,
research?
I usually as I'm research. No, I usually do quite a lot of research. I'll know a plot, and I'll have ideas, and I'll have an end point, and maybe a character, and maybe the character's sorted out. But then I will do a lot of research. Then I'll scene card it in a lot more detail than most people I think scene card, and then I will write the treatment. Then I go back, dive back into the research again, and then I will redraft the treatment.
Right. Okay.
And hopefully the treatment will become a bit shorter then as well. You're putting stuff in, but you're also taking a lot of stuff out that's needless. And then from there, I usually feel confident to write the draft and then just call people up if I need to during the process to ask specific questions, and then the script will go off to those people quite often before I let anyone else read it, and then they can check the accuracies, and I can change all the problems with it. And then once I'm okay with that, I know that the problems then are about story, character, motivation.
Stuff that you can sort of sort out on the page.
Exactly, and you can sort out with your team or whatever. But that's the process. But it's really hard to know when to stop and when you've got enough. But I do urge people to research the hell out of it. But it's very frustrating sometimes because all you want to do. My favourite part is with the one project where I am now, which is the script writing, because by then you feel like you know it pretty well. Maybe not 100%, but you're pretty much there. You know that world. You know the vernacular. You know the characters and people that operate in whatever world you're talking about, and you've got that support there, but you've also got a very detailed treatment. You can go off piste, and I do sometimes allow myself to say, if there's a corner in the script where I say, what's over there, I'll go off and explore that, but I know I've got this spine that I can come straight back to. And quite often what I find is as I'm writing, I realise I don't need that scene, so I can just put that little bit in here and things. So it will change from the treatment, but not radically, I would say. That's usually been worked out beforehand, and it makes writing the script a lot easier. Then I can get my 4 or 5 pages a day done, and I not get stuck very often because I know what I'm writing next time. Even though you hate it when you come to a different scene. Sorry, am I boring you, Ben?
got a really bad tickle in my throat. Do you know, it's weird, but before we record these podcasts, no problem at all. As soon as I hit record, I get a tickly throat.
Your throat's self-conscious.
Yeah.
You have a self-conscious larynx.
That's what it is, yeah. Just every time you're going to talk now, that's it. Okay, I think I'm good to go.
Right, I'll finish up. There's nothing else really that I think I want to add to that. I mean, it's just about, I think a lot of people give up on their scripts because they don't do the research, or they get scared of the research, or they're desperate to write the script, but they get bored of the heavy lifting of research. And sometimes, occasionally, research is boring. I mean, generally you're really into the subject and you're really into the topic and you want to know more. But certainly at the very start, it's boring in a way because it's so big you don't know where to start. And it's not until you start to get a rudimentary understanding of the world that you're exploring that you're like, oh, okay. And sometimes it's boring because you just need to know answers for specific things, and it's just frustrating. You want to find these things out. But once you start to feel that world and know that world, it fleshes out your story incredibly, and then you feel when you go into that script, then you're much more confident, and you're much more confident to make it past page 20.
I'm slightly interested in how, when you're doing your research, for example, you say that you've been talking to a drugs group and that sort of thing. I'm interested to know how that phone call goes. How do you actually think, right, okay, I need to talk to these people, I need to ring them, or how do you make contact and then sort of
It's
ask?
better if it's through someone else, and usually pretty much most of the ones I've always done, it's again through someone else. One thing that really helps is if you've done films before, because certainly before I went to speak to talk with sort of spousal abuse groups and things like that. I don't just do these kind of topics, but these are just to flesh out
because to these people it's their life.
Exactly.
And they're going to feel some way about it.
Most people are okay though. I mean, most people are okay, and what you do is you warn them that if anybody's uncomfortable, you won't come you won't come to that particular session where they're there. But generally most people are okay. But usually you just explain what you're trying to do, and then quite often there's a good idea to send over a copy of a film you've done before if you can, so they can get an idea of the that you're not just some weird guy. And then hopefully you'll get to speak to them, and then you just be honest about who you are and what you're doing, and then sometimes people are very closed off at first and it takes time, but eventually as they get more comfortable they will. And what I always say to these people is, if you want to, I thought you turned that off.
Well, it's on vibrate, isn't it?
It's very loud, vibrate.
It is quite loud, isn't it? I'll just put it there.
Okay.
Because that's much
better.
better.
Why are you putting it on your lap? Is that normally what you do?
It'll
vibrating equipment.
The number hasn't come up with anybody in particular, so
they can. No one important.
No, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it's. Is it going to finish? No, it's just they're very persistent.
Any second, it will go to there. It is.
Okay, well done. So you just have some respect for these people, and just say that if they want to read the script, allow them to read the script. I don't get protective over it. I mean, some people won't be bothered either way. They're very open to share, but some people will want to read it, and I think having them involved in the process only helps. And just say that if there are things they're uncomfortable with, you won't use them, and stick to that. I think some people can be a bit too mercenary about it.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, for a feature film, how long on average would you say that you should be doing research for? I mean, it's no good saying, you need to research for 2 years before you put pen to paper. I mean, does it depend on subject matter?
Some people don't. I mean, if you look at Hollywood, the way Hollywood works, if you get hired on to write a script or rewrite a script, you might only get 8 weeks.
Right.
And so how are you going to research?
In
8 weeks. But if you look at like people like William Nicholson and people like that, they will write. They will get chosen because of they've already done the research for projects in the past.
Yeah.
Like he gets chosen for a lot of kind of historical epics because he's already done the Elizabeth movies. So he's already spent months, if not years,
doing research.
Yeah, and then he got chosen for I don't know if he chose it or pitched it for the Vikings series, which is I don't know if you've seen it. It's a Love Film original series, and he wrote that, but he researched the Vikings for a good 4 or 5, maybe even 6 months.
Right.
You know, just reading Viking literature and everything.
So really, in that sense,
then
some research is actually good for things further down the line.
Yeah,
You know, even projects that you don't even think of.
Absolutely. I mean, and to be honest, particularly in Hollywood, when you get rehired or hired by other people, it's because they're looking at back catalogue and they think, oh right, this guy would
he knows
be good.
something about that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was just listening to a great podcast interview with is it Ben Ridley? He wrote 12 Years a Slave, which is about to come out in the UK, and he's probably going to win the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. And it took him, you know, he started work on that. He started the research on that in 2008.
Right, okay.
And he didn't start the script until 2011.
Oh, really?
Or 12, yeah.
Right, okay.
It might have been.
So you would hope that he knows something about his subject matter then in 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. And he read everything good, and he was reading old newspapers to get the vernacular and the way that people talk. And he said that was actually, he found the best way to get into that world was reading the newspapers, not just the books. And things. Sometimes even watching movies similar to your subject is a good way. But obviously, in Hollywood, sometimes you might only have a couple of weeks to research, and it might be extremely difficult. So it might not have that richness. But if you're writing a spec script, for me, there's no excuse not to research. I think you should always do your due. I can't even say
diligence.
Yeah, that one. And then that's it really. I think that if you know the topic, like because you've lived it or you've just lived it for years and you know people in that world, it won't take much. You might be able to research it in a few weeks or a couple of months. But if it's a completely alien topic and one that, you know, there are plenty of people out there who would know in detail, you should really do that. And that's why I like to have 2 projects on the go. I rarely write 2 projects at the same time, but I usually be writing one and researching another. So I'll be researching the next one, so that when this one, you know, I put a draft of this one to bed for a bit, or it's just, you know, going into research or it's going to the readers, then I can really get stuck into it.
Are you able to sort of decompartmentalize your mindset? So when you're writing the script for this one, researching this one, do you find that, you know, it gets to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so I put that one down and then I pick this one up? Do you find that that's quite easy to do? Can you switch off from one and then just go to the other?
It's hard to do writing it. The only reason is because of the time that I have to write. I have to be very strict about that. I only really write one project at once, because otherwise it gets too diluted and the drafts of things take forever. But in terms of switching the mindset from one project to another, I've taught myself to do that, so I can actually, you know, literally. And David S. Goyer, some people can't. There are loads of screenwriters who
I think I would find that difficult.
It's difficult. Like, I couldn't probably go straight into writing another script in the afternoon, for example. And to be honest, once I've done 4 or 5 pages, if I keep writing, I'm starting to do damage to the script, because you just kind of become a bit sort of blasé and tired about it. And so I'd say 4 or 5 pages is my limit of reasonable material in a day. But there, if you look at David S. Goyer, he gave a talk recently at BAFTA. You can listen to the BAFTA podcast, really interesting. Obviously, he wrote, you know, the Dark Knight trilogy, and is writing Batman vs Superman at the moment.
We'll put a link to it.
Yeah, we can link to it on our links. We need to update the links page, I think, with the last couple of episodes. But he talked about that, because he's producing Da Vinci's Demons TV show, and he's writing Batman vs Superman at the moment. He's literally as strict as he'll start at 8 o'clock or whatever, and then at 10:30 he has to stop working on Batman's Superman, Vinci's Demons. Right. You know, every day, and that's how it works. It's very strict. Whereas other writers can only have to write one thing furiously, like Abby Morgan. She wrote Shame and The Hour and stuff like that. She'll spit out a draft in 2 weeks. She can knock out a draft, which to me is just unbelievable. And then, but what she'll do is just 30 or 40 drafts, but really write them really quick, fast, furious, blast them out. I wish I could be more like that in a way. But yeah, I've taught myself to switch from one project, because over the years I've always been used to developing a few projects at once, so I'm kind of used to just switching my brain over to something else.
But I think it's very handy if you can do that.
Yeah. So what time are we on now? Have we got time for you?
We're up to about 30 minutes.
We're up to 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Have we got time for you?
Oh, well, I don't really have a lot to say, to be honest with you.
Okay.
This is more of a Phil Blake episode, really, to be honest.
Oh, got to give the people what they want.
I'm okay with that. You know, I live in your shadow and I fully accept it.
Sometimes I live in your shadow.
Yeah, but that's just
depends on where the sun is.
Yeah, exactly. That's more about physics than anything else. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us. I mean, just give us a brief insight recently into what you've been doing, because you've worked for some very high profile clients recently. So I'm kind of interested in what's the etiquette and, you know, what have you learned about the process of working with inside these short shoots but very big machines.
Well, that's exactly what they are. They're very big machines. The thing that I found in the commercial world, especially, is feature film techniques and processes are brought to play every much as they are in feature films on commercial shoots. So for a start, I'm staggered really by how much money is spent. Because it is just a huge amount of money. Some of these things, some of the features that we're developing will have smaller budgets than some of the commercial shoots that I've been on. So that sort of sums up a lot of what we do. But then, similarly, that money is being spent. It's not just being thrown anywhere. It's actually being spent on processes and people that need to be there. To give you an idea of exactly how it will go down when we get the call, someone will ring me up and they'll say, look, we need to get an aerial shot for X, Y, and Z. Can you do it? Yes, we can. And then it will be, right, okay, we need to slot you into the bigger system of what a day schedule will look like for everybody else. Because, even though to me, our shot is the most important in there are lots of other people that are working on the set as well, and their shots are just as important as ours, and you have to find time to put all these things. And especially if you're working with actors and things like that, there's only one of them. So you can't have a second unit with the same actor working somewhere else as that, so all of a sudden the scheduling issue is quite a big one. For example, we were recently on a very big shoot, very expensive shoot for a mobile phone company. It's the one that's just after 2.
Before 4?
Exactly. And that was actually quite a fun little one. I'm not entirely sure when it's being released, but it'll be released, I think, this side of Christmas. But that was quite a fun one. But it was a week-long shoot to them. We were only there for one day. But they literally closed off an entire road and cul-de-sac. They had access to every single house that was in the road and cul-de-sac. Wow. To the point where, Mrs. Smith at number 8, that's the makeup house, and Mr. Davis at number 6, that's catering, and stuff like that. So they literally had the run of this road for a week. And I can only imagine the amount of money they must have thrown at these people in order for them to live like that for a week. But we were there and we were flying our stuff and everything was hunky-dory. But yeah, I mean, it's when it comes to processes and stuff like that, it's just the same as it would be on a feature, really. Wow.
And who are your main points of contact? Is it a production manager?
Initially, the very first phone call will normally come from a producer, or an EP, or an executive producer. Those will more than likely be the first 2 or 3 phone calls would be from somebody at that sort of level. When we start getting down and closer to the shoot, I'll start taking phone calls from all sorts of people. The AD will always want to speak to us to find out exactly what the movement order will be for us, what kit we need, where we need it, how close we need it to be, because they're obviously the AD is in charge of the floor. They need to know exactly what kit is going where and how to organise it to get it there as well. So we'll have conversations about that. We'll have conversations with the focus puller. We'll want to know whether or not he needs to do anything for us, because obviously we're flying a camera, so anybody that's associated with the camera team will be calling us. The DP will want to call us to find out exactly what camera we can lift, what lens we're going to put on there, about ND filters, that sort of stuff. And then we'll have video playback call us, because they want to know, once we've done a take, how can we play that back afterwards? And also they want to know exactly how we can get a live image as well, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, really, prior to the actual shoot, we're in touch with most of the department heads, and most of the people within those departments as well will have at least a phone call with us to find out exactly how their roles will fit in with what we do. You know, and actually that's one thing that I've noticed on some of the bigger commercial shoots is these people are very, very good at their job. They've done it for years. They know their job inside and out. And once the producer has put together me and the DOP, for example, he is trusting of those people enough to just step back then and let everybody else have a conversation with them. And then when it gets to the day, we've already done our jobs and talked to each other, and we already know exactly how it's going to go down, and it just gets done.
Fantastic. And you know, you've worked for some very big clients recently. What do you think is the biggest challenge that they've had on the set that you've seen that either involve Octocopter or not? That, you know, and how did they overcome it? Is there any big challenges you can think of?
One of the biggest challenges is we've recently done we didn't recently, we earlier in the year we did a shoot for Stink Digital, and that was a shoot that I can tell you about now. I think I might have even alluded to it in some previous podcasts, but it's now become released so I can talk about it. But it was the very first time an octocopter was ever used in a to deliver a 720 degree film within a film narrative. And what that means is you can look at the video as it's playing, but you can grab hold of it and you can look up, down, back, left, right as the video is progressing, and there's CG elements in there and all sorts of stuff. But the biggest challenge that we had for that was that none of the technology existed to do it. You know, they had the idea, but they didn't really know how we were going to do it. So we had to develop a camera system that would give us a completely spherical view of the world. And we had to devise a way of actually attaching that camera system to the octocopter. And then once the shoot was done, they had to develop a way of stitching all of this together, adding CG elements, and then a delivery system for it effectively as well. So that really is probably one of the biggest things that we've ever done that's required a lot of post-production conversation and a lot of post-production work to actually get it off the ground.
And this is actually going to be available on mobile as well, right? So you can actually look around.
Exactly, that was one of the selling points of it. You can go to it now. If you go to the Cloud 12 website...
we'll put a link there.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it. You can go and have a look at it now. And there's a making of as well, so it'll give you a better understanding of how we did it. But yeah, the idea is that they want to sort of play it on a mobile phone, and obviously use the accelerometers in the mobile phone. So as it's playing, you can move your phone around and have a look at this spherical world as it's playing, which I think is quite a clever idea.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not been done before, and I think that for us is definitely the most technically demanding thing that we've done to date.
Okay, fantastic. And any tips for working at that kind of higher level of promo work?
Any tips?
TV ad work kind of thing?
My top tips, I guess, would be available on your phone.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I
like just now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Be available. I take phone calls any time of day. I don't have an office hours kind of system working with me, so I'm up for taking a call anytime, and that really helps people, especially if there's a production company that you're working with abroad. It's a bit of a pain in the ass being called at 11 o'clock at night, but if people can depend on you and rely on you, they'll come back.
Yeah,
they want you to work again. I mean, that's the
and it has you've had repeat clients.
Oh, loads. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's because we're very helpful. I'm not afraid to pick up someone else's bags and move those as well if they need moving. It's just it's that kind of thing. Just make yourself useful when you're on site, and be respectful of everyone that you meet on set, really, and you'll get on just fine.
Cool. Okay, what time are we on now? Must be nearly.
I think it's time to wrap the show up, actually.
Okay.
Because we do waffle otherwise.
Yeah, if we get started talking about movies or anything like Gravity. No, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Okay. So, how can they reach us?
Email, you can get in touch with me at ben@fictionfoundry.co.uk.
Okay, and you can get in touch with me via phil@fictionfoundry.co.uk. And if they don't want to talk to either of us,
they can get in touch with howdy@fictionfoundry.co.uk.
Okay, you can also follow us on Twitter, and that's @fictionfoundry.
And you can follow us on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/thefictionfoundry.
Okay, anything else? Are we done?
I think so.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Wow. We're actually finishing at a reasonable time this time.
I think we're going to try and get a guest on again next time, aren't we?
We keep promising
We keep promising it, but
well, seriously, in episode 18 they would have had numerous guests.
That's true. Yeah.
But we do want that other one guest.
Yes.
We're still trying to get, but we got to get
well,
to
actually,
London
two of them.
Are there?
Yeah.
Who's the other one?
There's one that's working as a DP at the moment on a feature.
Oh, in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be good to get him on when we've got a weaker episode.
Yeah. Just need to knock one out. Okay then. Right then. So it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.